Pressure doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. Not the version you show the world. Not the version you carefully construct. Not the version you rehearse in your head when everything is calm and predictable, but the version that exists underneath the surface, underneath the noise, underneath the fear, underneath the illusion of control you thought you had. The version that doesn't wait for permission. The version that doesn't pause to calculate. The version that reacts instantly before logic has time to catch up. And that is the version most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Because it's raw, unfiltered, honest in a way that comfort never allows. And in those moments, when everything tightens, when your chest compresses and your breathing becomes shallow, when your heartbeat begins to echo louder than your thoughts, when your mind starts racing faster than you can control, when your thoughts scatter like broken glass, sharp, chaotic, impossible to piece together in time, that's when the truth appears. Not the truth you tell others, but the truth of what you've practiced, what you've repeated, what you've conditioned into yourself day after day without realizing it. Because in that moment, you don't rise to the occasion. You don't suddenly become stronger, smarter, calmer, more disciplined. You fall. You fall to your level of training, to your default patterns, to the behaviors you've reinforced in silence, in comfort, in moments that felt insignificant. And that's why pressure feels overwhelming to most people. Not because it's too much, but because it exposes what hasn't been built. So the real question is not, can you handle pressure? That question is too shallow, too late, too reactive. The real question is deeper, more precise, more uncomfortable. What have you trained yourself to do when pressure arrives? Do you hesitate or execute? Do you panic or observe? Do you collapse inward or remain present? Because pressure is not the enemy. It's the mirror, and it will reflect, with brutal accuracy, the person you've been becoming when no one was watching. Most people misunderstand calm. They think calm is the absence of chaos. They think it's something you feel when life is quiet, when nothing is at risk, when nothing is uncertain. They associate calm with ease, with comfort, with situations that don't challenge them, don't test them, don't force them to confront themselves. They think calm is what happens when everything goes right, when conversations are smooth, when plans unfold exactly as expected, when outcomes are predictable, when there is no pressure to perform, no urgency to respond, no consequences waiting on the other side of their actions. But that's not calm. That's comfort. And comfort is fragile. Because the moment reality shifts, the moment something unexpected happens, the moment pressure enters the situation, that feeling disappears. It collapses instantly because it was never built to last. Real calm, the kind that doesn't crack, doesn't shake, doesn't disappear the moment things become uncertain, is something entirely different. It doesn't depend on the environment. It doesn't rely on things going your way. It doesn't require silence, safety, or stability to exist. It remains, even when everything else doesn't. And that kind of calm is not natural. It is constructed, deliberately, patiently, through repetition, through awareness, through discipline applied in moments most people ignore. It is built in discomfort, refined under pressure, strengthened in situations where panic would be the easier response. And centuries ago, there was a man who mastered this to a level that still confuses people today. A man who stepped into life or death encounters, not occasionally, but repeatedly. Situations where hesitation meant loss, where distraction meant failure, where fear could not be afforded. And yet, he did not rely on adrenaline. He did not depend on emotional intensity. He did not allow panic to dictate his actions. He walked in with stillness, not the stillness of inaction, but the stillness of total control. His mind did not rush ahead. His body did not betray him. His perception did not distort under pressure. Everything remained clear, measured, precise, not because he lacked fear, but because he understood something deeper than fear itself. He understood that fear is not the problem. Reaction is. He understood that chaos outside only becomes dangerous when it creates chaos within. And most importantly, he understood that calm is not something you wait for. It's something you train. This is the system. Chapter 1. Detach from the outcome. The first principle is simple. Deceptively simple. But almost nobody follows it. Not consistently. Not when it actually matters. Because it requires something most people are unwilling to release. You are too attached. Attached to winning. Attached to being right. attached to being seen a certain way, attached to how things should go, according to the version of reality you've already imagined in your head. You don't just want to act. You want a specific result, a specific outcome, a specific ending, a specific confirmation that things will go in your favor. And that attachment is what creates pressure, not the situation, not the difficulty, not the stakes, but the demand you place on reality to conform to your expectations. Because the moment you believe something must happen, the moment you decide that there is only one acceptable outcome, you create resistance. Resistance against uncertainty, resistance against change, resistance against anything that doesn't align with what you want. And now your mind is no longer unified. It splits. One part of you is trying to control, forcing, pushing, anticipating, trying to bend reality into the shape you've already decided it should take, while the other part is reacting to what is actually happening in real time, moment by moment, outside of your control. And that division creates friction, internal conflict, hesitation, overthinking, emotional interference. You're no longer acting clearly. You're negotiating with reality while trying to perform inside it. And that friction is what destabilizes you. It slows you down. It clouds your perception. It drains your focus, not because the situation is too complex, but because your mind is working against itself. The system removes that, not by making you passive, not by lowering your standards, not by convincing you that outcomes don't matter at all, but by shifting your focus completely. From outcome to execution, you stop obsessing over what will happen and anchor yourself in what you can do. Right now, not later, not after everything is clear, not when you feel ready. Now, because you don't control results. You never did. Results are influenced by too many variables, too many moving parts, too many factors outside your reach. But actions are yours. Your decisions, your movements, your responses in the present moment. That is where control exists. And when your attention locks onto that, when you fully commit to the process instead of the prediction, something shifts. The noise begins to fade. The urgency begins to settle. The pressure begins to dissolve. Not because the situation became easier, not because the stakes disappeared, but because your relationship to the situation changed. You are no longer resisting reality. You are moving with it. And in that alignment, there is clarity, there is precision, there is calm. Not fragile calm, but the kind that holds, even when everything else doesn't. Chapter 2. Slow the internal world. Under pressure, everything speeds up. Not just the situation, but you. Your breathing shortens, becoming shallow, uneven, automatic. Your thoughts accelerate, jumping ahead, skipping steps, trying to solve everything at once. Your perception narrows, locking onto fragments instead of the full picture. Time feels distorted. Moments feel rushed, compressed, like they're slipping away faster than you can respond. And in that state, you feel one overwhelming urge to move faster, to react quicker, to decide immediately, to do something, anything, just to keep up with the intensity of the moment. But that's the trap, because speed, without control, is chaos. It looks like action, but it's actually reaction, unstable, uncalculated, driven by urgency, not clarity. And the faster you move in that state, the more mistakes you create, the more you overlook, the more you misjudge, the more you lose control while believing you're gaining it. The system teaches the opposite. You don't match the speed of the situation. You don't allow external chaos to dictate your internal state. You do something that feels unnatural at first. You reduce your internal speed. Deliberately, you interrupt the acceleration. You refuse to let your mind run ahead of your awareness. Until everything begins to stabilize again. Until the noise softens. Until the distortion clears. Until your perception widens back to what is actually in front of you. One breath. Slow. Intentional. Draw it in fully. Hold it just long enough. Release it with control. Not to relax. Not to escape the moment. But to regain command over it. Because your breath is the entry point. The fastest way to influence your internal state in real time. And once your breathing stabilizes, your mind follows. Your thoughts begin to organize. Your reactions begin to slow. Your awareness returns. Because calm is not softness. It is not passivity. It is not hesitation. Calm is precision. It is the ability to see clearly, think clearly, act clearly. Even when everything around you is unstable. And precision only exists when your internal state is stable, not perfect, not emotionless, but steady enough to function without distortion. So while everything around you escalates, while others rush, panic, overcommit, and lose control, you do the one thing no one expects. You slow down, not your actions, but your internal world. And in doing so, you separate yourself from the chaos. You create space where others feel pressure. You see options where others see urgency. You act with intent while others react out of fear. And in that difference, you gain an advantage that panic can never access. Chapter 3. See without distortion. Pressure doesn't just affect your body. It doesn't stop at your breathing, or your heart rate, or the tension in your muscles. It goes deeper. It alters the way you see. Your perception, the very lens through which you interpret reality, begins to shift. Subtly at first, then completely. You start imagining outcomes that haven't happened, projecting into the future, creating scenarios that feel real but aren't. You exaggerate threats, turning small risks into overwhelming dangers. You misread signals, interpreting neutral actions as negative or missing critical details entirely. And without realizing it, you stop seeing reality. You stop responding to what is, and start reacting to what you believe is happening, to your interpretation, your assumptions, your internal narrative running unchecked in the background. And that's where the real danger begins. Because your actions are now based on distortion, not truth. That's why people collapse under pressure. Not because the situation is impossible, not because they lack ability, but because they are no longer grounded in reality. They're fighting shadows, responding to illusions, making decisions based on incomplete or entirely inaccurate perceptions. They don't fail because of what's happening. They fail because of what they think is happening. The system removes that, not by giving you more information, not by making the situation easier, but by stripping away everything that isn't real. You observe, without interference, without the constant need to label, judge, or predict. You see, without adding meaning. No assumptions layered on top. No projections into the future. No emotional coloring distorting what's in front of you. Just raw awareness. Clean, direct, undisturbed. You ask simple questions. What is actually here? Not what could happen. Not what might go wrong. What is here, right now? What is actually happening? Not what you fear is happening, but what can be verified, observed, confirmed. What is actually required? Not everything at once. Not every possible action. Just the next step. That matters. And when you see clearly, something shifts. Your response loses complexity. It becomes simple, direct, effective, because clarity removes hesitation. It removes overthinking. It removes the unnecessary layers that slow you down. You stop doing everything and start doing what matters. Because clarity eliminates unnecessary movement. And unnecessary movement is where mistakes are born. Extra steps, extra thoughts, extra reactions that were never needed in the first place. When you see without distortion, you move less, but achieve more. And in high-pressure moments, that difference is everything. Chapter 4. Remove the self. This is where it becomes uncomfortable. Not physically, but internally. Because under pressure, your ego gets involved. Quietly at first, almost unnoticeable. Then suddenly, it takes over everything. How do I look? What if I fail? What will people think? What does this say about me? What happens if I'm not enough here right now? And just like that, you're no longer in the moment. You've left it. Not physically, but mentally. You're in your head, split between action and self-awareness, between what needs to be done and how you're being perceived. You become divided. One part of you trying to act, the other part watching, judging, interfering. And that division creates hesitation. You second-guess. You overanalyze. You delay. Not because you don't know what to do, but because you're too focused on yourself to do it cleanly. Your movements lose precision. Your timing becomes inconsistent. Your confidence fluctuates moment by moment. All because the self has entered the equation. The system cuts that out completely. Not by boosting your confidence. Not by convincing you that you're perfect, but by removing the need to think about yourself at all. There is no you in the moment. No identity to protect. No image to maintain. No reputation to defend. No internal narrative trying to explain what's happening. There is only the action. Only the task in front of you. Only the movement required, right now. You become fully absorbed. Not thinking about performance, but executing it. Not analyzing the moment, but existing inside it. And when that shift happens, something disappears. The tension, the hesitation, the internal noise. Because all of it was tied to the self. And when the self disappears, so does fear. Because fear requires something to lose. An image, a reputation, an identity. Something you're trying to protect, or preserve, or prove. But when you are fully engaged in the present, there is nothing to protect, nothing to defend, nothing to measure yourself against. There is no past to regret, no future to fear, only the present action unfolding in real time. And in that state, you become fluid, unrestricted, undistracted, unaffected by the weight that normally slows you down. Because there is nothing holding you back from doing exactly what needs to be done. There is nothing to lose. There is only something to do. Chapter 5. Accept the worst before it happens. Most people try to avoid thinking about failure. They push it away, ignore it, silence it the moment it appears. They distract themselves. They replace it with forced positivity. They pretend it doesn't exist, as if ignoring it will somehow weaken it. But it doesn't, because under pressure, it comes back, stronger, louder, more invasive than before. Not as a quiet thought, but as a surge, a sudden wave of what ifs you can't control. What if this goes wrong? What if I mess this up? What if everything falls apart right here? And because you never faced it, you're not prepared for it. So it overwhelms you. Not because the fear is valid, but because it's unfamiliar, unprocessed, unchallenged, left to grow unchecked in the background. The system takes a different approach. It doesn't avoid fear. It confronts it. Early, before the pressure peaks, before the moment demands action, before your mind starts racing. You face it directly, calmly, without emotion, without resistance. You ask the question most people are too uncomfortable to ask. What is the worst-case scenario? Not the exaggerated version. Not the catastrophic fantasy your mind creates under stress. The real one. The grounded one. You define it clearly. You see it. Fully. Without turning away. And then, you accept it. Not emotionally. Not dramatically. Not as something you want to happen, but as something you are prepared for. Logically. If it happens, I deal with it. Step by step. Moment by moment. Without panic. And if it doesn't, I proceed. No hesitation. No second guessing. No unnecessary fear. But either way, you remove its power over you. Because fear doesn't come from the event itself. It comes from uncertainty. From the unknown. From the unanswered question of what if. That lingers in the background, unresolved. And the moment you bring that question into the light, the moment you define it, examine it, and accept it, it loses its grip. It stops controlling your actions. It stops interrupting your focus. It stops dictating your decisions. Because there is nothing left to surprise you. Nothing left to shake you unexpectedly. You've already faced it. And in doing so, you've neutralized it. Because the moment you accept the worst, you eliminate uncertainty. And when uncertainty disappears, fear has nothing left to attach itself to. What remains is clarity, stability, and most importantly, freedom to act. Chapter 6. Train stillness in motion. Calm is not something you summon in crisis. It is not a switch you flip. Not a state you suddenly enter when things go wrong. Not a mental trick you perform when pressure becomes overwhelming. Because if you are trying to be calm in the moment of crisis, you are already too late. Calm is not created in the storm. It is built long before it ever arrives. Quietly, repetitively, almost invisibly, in small moments that most people dismiss as meaningless. Day by day, situation by situation, reaction by reaction. It is shaped in the ordinary. How you respond to inconvenience. When something small disrupts your plan. How you handle delays. When time is taken from you and you are forced to wait. How you deal with discomfort. When things are slightly harder, slower, or more frustrating than expected. These are not random moments. They are training environments. Every reaction is training. Every pause is training. Every emotional response you allow, or refuse to allow, is conditioning your nervous system for what it will do under real pressure. And most people never realize this. They think only big moments matter. But it is the small moments that decide everything. Because the mind does not suddenly change under pressure. It repeats what it has practiced. So when pressure finally arrives, you don't need to force calm. You don't need to search for it. You don't need to remind yourself to stay composed. Because at that point, it is already decided. You already are calm. Not because the situation is easy, but because your system has learned how to remain steady in situations that weren't. You've trained it. Silently. Repeatedly. Without recognition. Without reward. Without urgency. And that is what makes it real. Because under pressure, you do not rise to your intentions. You fall to your conditioning. And if your conditioning is chaos, you collapse. But if your conditioning is stillness, you remain intact. That is the difference. And that is why this system works. Because it doesn't depend on motivation in the moment. It depends on repetition before the moment. It depends on who you become when nothing important seems to be happening. And that is the part most people ignore. They wait for pressure to reveal strength. Instead of building strength in the absence of pressure, they wait for the test. Instead of training every day like they are already being tested. But strong reactions are not created in big moments. They are built in quiet ones. In unnoticed choices. In controlled responses. In the discipline of not reacting when you used to react. And over time, those small decisions accumulate. Until stillness becomes natural. Not forced. Not artificial. Not temporary. But stable. And consistency creates stability. And stability is what holds when everything else collapses. So what was the secret? Not strength. Not fearlessness. Not some rare, unreachable level of discipline reserved for a chosen few. Not anything supernatural. Not anything complicated. It was simplicity. A structure so simple, most people overlook it entirely because they assume the answer must be more complex than this. Detach from outcomes. Stop tying your peace to a specific result. Stop demanding that reality unfold exactly the way you imagined it should. Slow your internal world. When everything speeds up outside, refuse to let it speed you up inside. Return to breath. Return to control. Return to stillness. See clearly. Remove distortion. Stop reacting to imagined threats and projected futures. Observe only what is actually happening in front of you. Remove the self. Step out of the need to be seen, to be validated, to be protected. Let action exist without ego interfering in every moment. Accept the worst. Face uncertainty directly. Define it. Remove its hidden power by acknowledging it without fear. Train daily. Not in extremes. Not in rare moments. But in ordinary situations where discipline is quietly built through repetition. That's it. No complexity. No hidden layer. No secret technique waiting to be discovered. Just a system. Simple in structure. But demanding in consistency. Applied repeatedly. Again and again. Until it stops being something you practice. And becomes something you are. And when that happens, pressure no longer feels like pressure. It loses its identity. It stops feeling heavy, urgent, overwhelming, and starts feeling clear. Because clarity replaces panic. Because awareness replaces reaction. Because training replaces fear. And while others are overwhelmed by the moment, pulled in different directions by emotion and uncertainty, you are steady, grounded, present, controlled without force. And while others react, instantly, emotionally, without awareness, you respond, deliberately, cleanly, precisely. And in that difference, everything changes. Not the situation, but you. Pressure is coming. That's guaranteed. The only question is, who will you be when it arrives? Not who you hope to be. Not who you pretend to be. But who you've trained yourself to become. So start now. In the smallest moments. Because when the big moment comes, there won't be time to prepare. Only time to reveal. And when it does, you won't rise. You'll execute. This is the standard. This is the discipline. This is Cypher Phantom. Subscribe now. And train your mind to remain unshaken. When everything else breaks.